Welcome everybody. We are live, augforums.com/live broadcast, and this is our official rebuttal of GIs. So with me today, I have special guest Michael, or is it Mike, Michael, Mikey?
Michael's just fine. We don't have to discuss all of that.
All right, Michael Hansen from Silkcraft will be joining us today to talk about reports and kind of rebut all the geek love that Tim and I shared to GIs on the previous augforums.com live event. But before we get to that, a little housekeeping. We gotta pay the bills. Gotta pay the boss. So for all of those who are checking us out and want to show us some love, please check out our sponsors, augforums.com/sponsors. Click on their links. They love seeing people clicking from augforums.com. So go to that. The second thing I want to talk about is the Rolodex. So it only takes a couple minutes, but augforums.com/Rolodex, a great way to kind of not only see who's involved in the Acumatica community, but also to put yourself out there so others can reach out to you should they want to find you. And lastly, augforums.com/podcast. That is the longer format of these live events that my counterpart Tim Rodman does. So he likes to be behind the scenes on things, so not in front of the camera. So he's got his podcast, and I do the live events, and I get my energy from everyone out there. So guys, please show us some love and take a look at all this here. For anyone in on the live event, we always want to ask out there, where's everyone coming from, or where's everyone joining us today? So go ahead on the YouTube channel. Go ahead and let us know where you're coming or where you're at right now, or if you're vacationing or your hometown is, whatever you want to share with us. But let's get into the meat of things. So first off, Michael, can you give us just a little 30-second about who is Michael?
Right. So I'm a degree in computer science, which I assume a lot of us are in that kind of general field. Good morning from Vancouver, BC. That's awesome. Computer science nerd, like most of us, working out here in the Portland, Oregon area. System administrator for the Acumatica system, but I also happen to be our only IT person. So I'm like the only data nerd. So if the printer's broken, that's me. If a report needs to be made, that's also me. So just kind of my quick rundown for me.
Nice. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. So for those who are with us in the last one that we did like this, we really talked about GIs and we coined the hashtag GI Joe. So we'll have to see if anyone on our chat can chime in with a good hashtag, or maybe we can come up with one for reports. I will tell you that I love geeking out on GIs. One of my favorite things to get into, and I was not as excited about reports. But during the pre-show, the interview or chat session that I did with Michael here, he really made me a believer. I mean, I started geeking out on reports. I mean, I'm sorry, Tim. I hate to kind of be a little wishy-washy, but I mean, reports are really, as cool as a report can be, but it was really cool to kind of see some of the stuff. So today's gonna be that geek out session. Hopefully you guys can kind of share some of that excitement that I had yesterday when talking to Michael. So first things first, I'll do a little show. We talked a little bit about this in the GI session, but let me go ahead and share my screen here. And so one of the first things you can do with reports, and because I want to kind of sit on the fence with as far as GIs versus reports. So in your GI, so this is your generic inquiry, and this is one we have for non-stock items, and we have a historical inventory balance. So the flusher category is more of an internal thing, but this gives a quick look. I can see, hey, for us it's category of products, but we want to see beginning quantity, ending quantity, and all the ins and outs for this particular category of products. So it's a way to kind of get that reporting and ability to do groupings and what you can do very well with reporting, and something that was basically out of the box from Acumatica already. We only needed a little bit of tweaking, and we just were able to pull that up with clicking on an item. So it's a great way to kind of kind of use reporting and GIs. So kind of a cool thing with that. Michael, and we were talking yesterday, was this an area you hadn't seen before? Is that right?
Yeah, this is new to me, but I've just started diving into this, and there are so many applications right out of the gate. Like I was talking to you briefly before, if you're looking at header data, like the header on a PO, and you need to see the details, I can't see a reason you're not going to slap side panels on every one of those generic inquiries that shows you all your purchase orders or all your sales orders just to quickly see the detail. And then, of course, where you have custom analysis that comes in, oh, that's going to be slick. I'm going to be swamped for a month now trying to implement that in my sandbox.
Nice. Yeah, it was cool to kind of show some of that Michael hadn't seen before. One of the other things we talked about in the very beginning with reports is, and the power of reason why they're so important is the ability to do sub-reports. And we talked about, hey, generic inquiries. One of the problems with generic inquiries is that you can't. There's no generic inquiry reference to another generic inquiry. And Acumatica, if you're listening, we want that feature. We all want the ability to create a generic inquiry and then link to it from another generic inquiry, kind of like doing table joins within SQL. But you can't do that in generic inquiries. But you can do some of that with subreports. So why don't you go into a little bit about subreports and the power of subreports?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love using subreports when my joins are going to get really ugly. So if you want to add in a simple data field, but you realize it's going to create duplicate or triplicate lines and you don't have to do anything, and it would take you a while to build that out, sometimes it's easier just to make a small subreport, and all that report does is link your two data points you're looking for, and then you can call that subreport in the details or in the group header segments as necessary to bring in that data without flooding your joins or making your life overly complicated, because I think we've all had it where you're sitting with 10 plus tables trying to join them, and then you want to add in one more piece of data and you're looking at that going, oh, it's going to be a minute, right? It's going to be a 30-minute adventure here. Make a quick little subreport. Don't stress over that. And they take variables just fine, so you can pass over like an item ID, and it'll know to go look at kit specs or something, because you don't want to merge your kit specs into sales orders because that might be weird. But now you can say, hey, if I've got a sales order for this, I can merge in my kit specs to tell me which components I'm looking for to fulfill that sales order. That's kind of just the basic stuff we get into quite a bit with the subreports.
Nice. And if anyone has any questions on the YouTube channel, feel free to drop them in there, and we'll address them as we go, or anything you want us to cover, anything like that. Please feel free to throw questions at us. One of the things that we get into here at XByte with subreports is that when we deal a lot with serial numbers, and our customers needed an invoice that contained all the serial numbers for a particular line item, and there's no good way to do that just from the report. So, but we found, hey, you know what? Add a subreport, and that can give you just in a small section, hey, I want to create a list of those serial numbers, and it worked out beautifully for that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic use case. When you have something that isn't necessarily numbered very well, we've had that situation as well on my side where it's n many items, and I'm like, well, I don't want to keep repeating so many iterations, and you can do that in a subreport very quickly without causing repetition, and so that's always a fantastic out.
Nice. So what else do you see as like the big advantage of reports?
For the subreports or for report
just
writer
reports in general, the report writer?
My biggest one, variables, hands down. Because with a variable, you can call a function at runtime when the report generates, and while it's still cooking in the background. And when you call that function like a date time, it doesn't call it again because you've stored it in a variable. So why ask equals today 100 times in your report when you can set a variable to being today? And now instead of running a function that grabs a number or crazy date math, because some of these have crazy date math, you can just reference that number again and again. You choose your reset groups on your variables. So if you choose not to reset a variable at all, that thing's going to hold up for quite a while. Yeah, so that's probably my biggest advantage on that one.
No, this is the area that I know of in my talks to developers here. We are not taking advantage of it all. And when Michael started showing me his screen and all the variables he had, I was floored. I was like, this is like the coolest thing. I understand why he's so geeking out on reports. I mean, it's really cool to kind of see that. And Michael, do you have a minute here to kind of to show us that report you're showing me yesterday?
Yeah, absolutely. Tim, can you throw my screen up real quick? Get on to here. Okay, so this is a 26-week time-phased inventory report. It's massive, it's gross, and it runs every week, tells me what's coming in, what my demand's gonna be, and what my balance is for that week. So I can quickly tell if I don't have enough product for the orders I have coming in. To help fix this, I've set up variables. In the very first segment, my variables are just my dates. All this is setting my dates using a little bit of date math, right? Happy times right here. I'm not gonna reference these again up here because I don't want to keep adding date add today plus 7 for week 1, but I can just call that variable week 1. And that becomes critical down here where I actually do all my math. These things are disgusting, I'm not going to lie. It's a big pile of code that nobody really wants to get into, but let's jump into one of these. It references the today variables. It'll reference week variables and that kind of stuff. And this makes it easy for me to modify and extend my reports. If I have a problem, I can just add another variable in here. And I know that they're all going to be self-similar, so if I have to make a change, instead of wondering what's wrong with the code, I can quickly tell which variable is sitting here. So this is my variable that's sitting greater than or equal to week 9, less than week 10. So now I know that I've grouped my stuff in a bucket, and I'm not going to have to keep calling that date time because I'm looking at thousands of items at once with this report, and that's just going to break this thing if I'm sitting there running that date math every single time. It also makes it a little bit cleaner to read. When I've got week 1, I've got incoming, demand, and balance. I've got on order week 2, demand of week 2, and the balance for week 2. I don't have to read this to figure out what that field's doing. I know what it is. And if I need to go into the hood and take a look, I can do that as well.
Yeah, that was the. Go ahead and leave that report up there, Michael. And bring up the go ahead and bring up one of the demand numbers, because one of the coolest things I liked was just it becomes just normal readable logic. You're looking at it and you're like, oh, okay, I can read exactly what's going on. This wasn't one of the ones we were looking at. That I was thinking
you're talking about the balance numbers.
Yeah, the balance numbers. Yeah.
This makes it so nice. My balance is balance of week 14 plus on order for week 15 minus the demand for week 15. It's that straightforward. And I'm not going to rewrite all those giant code bricks in here because, well, we'd all go cross-eyed, and that's just no fun for anyone.
Yeah, I saw this, and maybe it's just me that I didn't know about these variables. This is the coolest thing. I love these, and getting into this because in ours, I know talking to our developer, he was showing me reports. He would have to, we make a change, he's got to make the change and copy it to 7 different places, and this makes it so much easier to do this kind of thing.
Yeah, when I make changes in here, it's pretty simple because they're all self-similar. Like if we look at the on orders, as gross as they are, the only thing that changes in any of these code bricks is just the week variables. They're all the exact same. You're just, the next brick's going to be week 25 and week 26 instead of 24, 25. And it's going to be 26, 27. It's not going to be something new every time. You're going to see the exact same data again and again. And there's no reason to keep reinventing that wheel or making the system keep processing all those commands you're sending over. Because if you're going to write a massive report that's got to be sent out to everyone, you don't want it to take all day or potentially not run at all if it's just going to crash. So
someone was asking what this report is doing as far as, is it projecting inventory into the coming weeks?
Yeah, so what this is actually used for, since I have demand and my balance, if we are short on inventory, this report's going to throw a negative in my balance. If I ever see a negative number in a column, we've done something wrong with our supply chain. And we ship our products in from overseas, so I have weeks of lead time, and sometimes a container rolls at the port. When that happens, my POs, which this accounts for all purchase orders, transfers, it looks at assemblies, it does the whole 9 yards. And when it brings it in, it's going to say, hey, I see your purchase order slated for 2 weeks past your next demand date. So I've got demand for 1,000, but my purchase order isn't coming in for 2 weeks. I'll see that negative in my balance, and I'll know that I have to shift my orders forward.
Yeah, awesome work on this one. And go ahead and leave that up. We're going to spend a couple minutes on this one. No problem. So a quick funny story for everybody. So Mike and I were talking yesterday about today's live broadcast. And he was trying to tout how nice reporting is because of your presentation and your ability to change your colors. Like, oh yeah, I can change the style of the color here. I did have to correct him a little bit, saying, you know what, that's also in GIs. So for any of those who don't know GIs, you can do row style as well as cell styles and set the color of those. So that's something that for for anyone that's looking at reports, the GIs now have that too. So Acumatica is doing a great job in bringing some of that power of reports into their generic inquiries.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And that gives me a lot more flexibility too inside the GIs, because I was only using it in the report writer. Conditional formatting is critical for my company. I have a lot of situations where I'll turn like your purchase order numbers, they'll turn red if they're in the wrong state. Like if they're in a report and they shouldn't be, like, hey, if it's being pulled up in here, it should have a state of on hold, let's say, and the state for some reason is shipping. I can tell them very quickly by just turning the colors red on that line so they know, hey, if that state's not on hold, turn it funny colors so the users can see it quickly. I don't need them to spend time trying to parse the data when I can do it for them.
Okay, and Tim, if you can bring up, oh, hey, Tim.
Actually, I had a quick question on the variables. Do you have any thoughts or comments on like where you put the variables? I've noticed it matters which section you put them in, and when you're grouping, it might change how they calculate. I noticed when you put them in a section, they're not available until further down. Do you have any thoughts on how you determine what section to put your variables in?
Absolutely. So this is a waterfall pattern, and I like to think of the top segment as the top waterfall. And if you're in the top, and the waterfall stops at your detail section, everything below is just kind of the reverse of that. So if you put it in my report here, report header section 1, that's a terrible name, I should fix that. I will have access to that variable in page header section 1, in the header of item ID, and in details section 1. So that gives me access to my date variables very quickly because I need them to be global, right? So if you put them in your topmost category, they're essentially a global variable with the entire report has access to. And if you put them in your detail level, only the details are going to look at that variable. This is useful when you come into, let's come into one of these, my collection here of variables. I have a reset group. The reset group is item ID. This stops me from giving a variable that's just going to add up everyone's demand and balance at once, because that's useless, right? So every time I get to a new item ID, it's going to roll my variable back to being 0, and it's going to start adding up everything again with all that code that's in there. And this is extremely useful for making sure that you're not like, why would I want to process that in the header? Well, at the header, it sees all the item IDs. So I'm going to get a summation. I want to make sure this process is down towards the detail level. In my case, it's one section above because my detail has a couple of duplicates in it because of the way I did my joins. But up at the item ID level, it's fantastic. And you were talking about process orders, I believe?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned that. I like your waterfall analogy there. It cascades on down the report. It makes sense.
Exactly. Now, when you're talking about the process order, you'll notice my very last variables are the balance variables. There's a reason for that. They will process in this order. The first thing it's going to do is go to on order past due. That's what that stands for. Then it's going to do on order week 1. If I put balance of week 1, the balance right up here at the top, it won't have calculated those variables yet. They're all going to be set to 0 or they're going to be null, and it's going to tell me I have a reference to a variable that hasn't been initialized. So make sure that if you're referencing a variable down here, that up above it is where that variable is actually doing all of its work. So if you've got summations that you're doing as a variable, like your balances or your totals, always put them at the bottom of your members list.
That's cool. Thanks for that.
Yeah, no worries.
Now, go ahead and Tim, go ahead and leave this screen for a second here. Michael, go ahead and scroll to the right a little bit. Something else that Michael's done really nice on this one that is the small details. So if you notice that week by week, he's changed the boldness. So
yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I've chosen, oops, that snapped back. So this is unbolded, next week is bold, next week is unbolded. Just makes it a little bit easier on my users' eyes because, again, this process is hundreds to thousands of items depending on the criteria. You pick it once, you're going to go cross-eyed really fast. So I made sure to add bold, and then there's a little black bar underneath here as well. So every item has a line in between them when it runs. So you're not going to get overwhelmed with just a giant data purge of garbage because nobody wants that.
That's really nice. It was something that when it's another one of those tiny things that you can do to kind of make your reports better is stuff like that. The understanding who's going to use it and what they need in order again to not go cross-eyed. That was pretty cool when I saw that one.
Yeah, that's a fantastic thing, and that kind of ties into how this thing exports into Excel. With a generic inquiry, when you export to Excel, you get your table. Hooray, that's great. But I've got a lot of use cases where I'm sending like this report out to people, and this is made to look pretty. I don't want this bar in Excel, right? I don't want certain things in Excel, so I can choose to hide them if I want to. And you can choose exactly which order they come in. Maybe the order in this report isn't the order I want in Excel. And so I can flip between all of those on the fly, which is really nice down here. Like this is just set to 111. These are all the same width fields. So if you have your Excels are not set for your cells down here, and they're all equal size, that is, they must be equal size, Excel will automatically format this left to right and put them in the correct order for you. If they're not equal size, you're going to have to set those numbers, and that can be kind of frustrating.
So another funny story from yesterday so Michael and I were talking about things, and that can catch you. We've had a report where we exported to Excel and we were banging our heads, but we didn't know about this feature. And we're banging our heads trying to figure out, why is the data not coming over from the report? I can see it in the PDF. It is plain in the world right there in front of me. But I hit export, it's not there in Excel. So if anyone else ever gets that, go to that field that Michael just showed you, and the Excel piece of it, the Excel cell, and if there's nothing there, that's why it's not coming out.
You also have to be careful that if you decide to actually map this to saying it's going to be in column number 2, if you have another one set to column number 2, sometimes the computer's not quite sure which one to pick, and you're only going to get one of those values. And that can be really frustrating as well. I've been hasty before and accidentally doubled up on a number or skipped an iteration just because I'm numbering them by hand, and I go from 14 straight to 16, and then I go to Excel and wonder why I've got a blank column in the middle. It's because I've misnumbered. And that is such an easy mistake to make. And this has a small feature for actually getting around that. So here's a quick report. I've just dragged 3 text boxes onto the top and 3 text boxes into the detail section. They're all set to 111. They're all equal size, and they're all the default size. So if you grab a text box, it's this exact size. There's one advantage to leaving your information in this method, and that's that you can come to edit, adjust Excel layout. Now this is 111 as expected, but this one's now set to number 2 down here in Excel cell. This one's set to number 3. It's going to be iterative, and it'll go across your entire report. It'll also do it in every single segment. This one is also a 2, and this one is also a 3. As I mentioned before, if you do something crazy and you shrink one of these boxes and you go to edit that Excel layout, it generally gets a little funny. Yeah, see, these are both a 2 now instead of a 2 and a 3. So if you custom size your columns, which I do in almost every single one of my reports, you're going to have to set it by hand. But if you do not custom size your columns and they're all the exact same, you merely need to adjust Excel layout, and this thing's going to give you the 2 and the 3 as expected. And if you've got like 20 plus columns, please don't number them by hand. Save yourself some time if you can keep them all equal size.
Great point right there. And you will go crazy. You will believe that you're back in preschool as you're counting your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3. We did not know about the keeping everything the same size, and we had to redo all of ours by hand when we find out that little tip. So Acumatica, if you're listening, we would love to see that. Hey, what to actually export to Excel in a generic inquiry. That would be so handy, because a lot of times you may want to see the data on the screen, but you know what? I don't need to see it when I export to Excel, and the ability to kind of control some of that would be very handy.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, I mean, the report writer is for exporting to Excel, because you're going to send that to a client and you know they just want to see numbers. They don't care that it's shiny. Fantastic, right? Or you've got a specific client who doesn't care about certain fields. You can make them custom versions that just don't have those fields set for Excel export. I do this all the time because I've got different shipping companies that care about different data points, but I only want to maintain one report. And then this really helps give me that flexibility.
All right, Michael, I have a good question here from Diane.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you start with all your boxes the same size and use adjust Excel layout, can you then change the sizes without messing up the Excel configuration?
Oh, absolutely. You can play that game all day. So what it is it's metadata attached to the field, this Excel column. So if I change this to whatever number, like 53, right? So let's, for grins and giggles, I'm going to do this to my main report. Let's watch me screw this up and hate myself later. 3, 4, 5. So I can make all of these be like that large. Pack now is huge. but it doesn't care that it's huge. It's still going to go in column number 6. So if you've got to do something crazy, have at it. Just number beforehand. And I have used that to my advantage as well when I know I'm going to the description on my item should generally be larger than my item number, right? They can have lengthy descriptions. So you can get that numbering in, which is what I assume you're alluding to here. And then you can quickly say, hey, now description needs to be twice the width so that this can fit all the text in.
I've got a follow-up on that, Michael. If you want to make it smaller, I haven't found a way yet to, I've had some columns in a report that are really small, and I can't adjust the Excel column width. There's a width field in that drop-down you were just in, but it looks like, but when I've tried it, it's the number of cells that it's going to take up. It's not like a pixel width. Have you found a way to shrink a column down when it exports to Excel to eliminate that white space?
I've not actually attempted to pull that off yet. I would imagine it's in this width area, but if you've tried it and you said it's not worked, then I'm willing to believe you on it. Yeah, I would assume that you'd set something like, I want this to be 20 pixels. So, well, that's not a 0. That's a dash because it's still learning to type. But you set it to something like 20px, and you should be okay to run it from there because it knows to bleed out pixels. That should be enough. And you say you tested this and it doesn't run on that, huh?
Yeah, it even click back in there. It'll see it says quantity of columns. So it wants a whole number, and it's just sizing it based on number of columns. So it's not quite as fine-tuned as I'd like it to be. I could see how it's helpful when you need it to expand, but I don't think it quite works when you need it to contract.
No, I completely agree with you. I hadn't thought about that. I always just have the habit of when I open up an Excel document, I'm just grab an Excel file here real quick. And we've got 1, 2, 3, and then this thing is really, really, really long. I just have a habit of grabbing this little arrow in the top left, double click the columns, and it auto sizes everything for me. But I'm sure that you're talking about if you were to email this out or have it as an automated process, how can you have that happen automatically? I don't know. I just have the muscle memory of always clicking here and then double clicking to resize all cells.
No problem. Just thought I'd give it a try.
No, and you really piqued my curiosity. When this is over, I'm going to start poking at that now.
If anyone wants to write a VBA macro that you can sit behind the scenes and it would read a file and do that formatting, we'd all be happy to kind of share that around. So that's kind of a challenge out there for our augforums.com audience, for all those who love writing VBA code. If I don't know how many great VBA, that's Visual Basic for Applications writers out there, but it's fun stuff. It
can be pretty terse though, because I've got one that inserts a picture from a folder every 24 cells and then sizes it to those merged cells. That's always been fun setting up those kind of VBA scripts.
Nice. Yeah, the back, apparently I'm old now because I can say back 20 years ago, I was doing something where it's crazy. The prompting for a file is an actual Excel file or an Excel add-in, and I was in Access, and so I had to somehow figure out that I had to reference the Excel library in order to prompt for a file name.
Oh, that is some good Microsoft junk right there. I love how they hide some of that stuff from the users. I've been like, you buried that in here? Well, fair enough. Let's do this.
So for any of the VBA people out there, you can kind of feel our pain on some of this. Getting back to the reports, now obviously it's one of the other big differences is just cascading data. Recently in the past year or so, Acumatica has given us the ability to group or to do kind of aggregate functions on different columns. There's no subgrouping in that. Other than maybe doing a filter on that data to kind of see that. But obviously that's a big advantage in report writing, is that you can do some of that cascading.
Yeah, so here I've brought up my container load plan, and this is sorted by agent, by date, by container, and then it tells you every item on that container. And then over here, I've got summations that give me the total value on the container, the total value over that date period, and the total value for that agent for what he's shipping us and what's on the ocean and what I'm expecting to have all that data come out like. This is not something you can perform in a generic inquiry without having so much repetitive data on the rows. And so getting those subgroupings like you're talking about is just amazing in the report writer. And This is when I know I have to get to a report writer. I love a generic inquiry as much as the next guy. Don't get me wrong. I spun one up just yesterday for somebody who's looking for a specific state of purchase orders. But that doesn't change the fact that when somebody says, I want to see this subtotaled by that, subtotaled by this, subtotaled by that, you immediately know that you're going to have to go to the report writer to pull that off nice and clean.
And then even within those groupings, the complex aggregates, another good piece that you really kind of need report writing. There's no, I mean, you showed some of that, some of your formulas before, but if you get into some of the complex aggregates.
Oh, yeah. Some of the really fun aggregates that you can get into, like if you've got to run over a date range along with summations, et cetera, sure, you can probably vary some of that in a generic inquiry, but you really wrecked your ability to modify that inquiry now. I mean, could you imagine trying to reread that code every single time to make a minor change? I mean, that's insanity. I would lose my mind. So
yeah,
jump back to time phase because that thing's got quite a bit going on in it. Probably my ugliest report are these time phase reports. They're rather long. Let's jump in here and grab a variable real fast. Let's just do on order week 6. So you can see this starts off with a sum if, I mean, right out of the gate. And in a generic inquiry, sure, you can pull off sum ifs, but you're now able to sum based in a group. So I'm not summing the detail lines, which is all a generic inquiry can do for me is put summations in this detail section. I'm now summing in a header, and I can play with all sorts of subtotals and complex aggregates inside of this subheader. And if I move up to the next header, I can do the same thing again. This is something that's really lacking in generic inquiries is getting a lot of the subtotals out. Now, they do have the ability to do a master total now in generic inquiries, which is super awesome, and I'm so glad that exists. But when you're still looking at multiple tiers of groupings that you need to work with and get aggregates out of, really, the report writer is going to save you, and you can write all sorts of craziness into these fun little buckets to make sure that you're adding up everyone appropriately over time phase intervals that exist within your subgroup.
Yeah, one of the nice things that we were talking yesterday also on this list is just you're showing how easy it was to create a new one because you just can copy, add, change because you do the variables, you can change.
Oh yeah. Like if we're going to add a week 7, I mean, you're just going to throw in that this is balance W27. It helps to spell, but you know, I'm still learning. A balance week 7, set your value expression to being like, hey, it's all week 26. You know, I knew what 26 was, so 27 is going to be the next iteration. You're just going to come slap this bad boy in here, change your numbers to go up 1. So instead of 25, you're looking at 26. Instead of 26, you're looking at 27, 26 to 27. You've now created the variable that holds this. Now I don't have any data supporting it underneath, of course, or well, it should have been a 27, but still. The idea is the same, that now I've got this. One thing to watch when you're playing with your variables, again, make sure you check your reset groups and your process orders. My reset group needs to be, again, item ID. Otherwise, I'm going to have a hard time with that variable because it's just going to take a rolling balance of every single item in the report. And I don't want that. I just want it for one item at a time.
Very nice, very nice. Now, so we've talked a lot about the power of report writer, and and maybe anyone on the YouTube live, they want to chime in. Have any of you guys gone to a generic inquiry and said, hey, you know what? There's this export as report button. I would love to get this to a report and then do some manipulation. Maybe you need to make it look great because I mean, generic inquiries exporting to Excel, if you're passing off to a client, of course, they can't, it doesn't work well for them. So to make things look shiny, to make them look pretty, you definitely need the report side of things. So how many of you on the YouTube have done this where you were on a generic inquiry and you wanted to get to a report? Let me see if anyone has done that.
Do you want to pull that up, Brian, on your screen, just to point it out?
Yeah, go ahead and pull it up. So here's one, and we have some of our own tables we added here for certain things. But so I had this, and I hit the little export as report button, and so when I'm looking at this, and this is the one I showed off before, this had all these fields listed, and there's a lot of fields. There's some calculations in them, and I'm like, I don't want to have to redo all that for this report. So that exporters report, oh, I'm like, what a time saver. That's gonna be awesome. And Acumatica, if you're listening here, we've been Acumatica some pointers on how to improve some of the stuff. So this is what you get. Hey, where is everything? Maybe I'm doing it wrong, but I just did it a second ago to recreate it. It really just gave me the joins. Actually, I missed one. And create those relationships for me. It didn't. Let me see who did parameters. I did do parameters. Okay, so filters are there. Those are there, but the fields are missing, and I was so disappointed because I knew there was some complexity into what we did, and I wanted it to kind of. I wanted the fields to be laid out here, because that would have been a big time saver. So.
Your big time saver there would not just be the list of fields, but the formulas, the fields
exactly.
that have there. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that was the piece that I wanted to kind of see out there. So even the list of fields, it'd be nice if those were dropped, because even just putting those out there is, I mean, still it's a big time saver to get out there. So I was a little disappointed. I mean, it does get the schema there. So if you have a bunch of tables and all that set up there, a bunch of filters, parameters, that is a big time saving. So I don't want to knock Acumatica for that, but I was definitely disappointed in not seeing the details there.
No, it has a lot of use cases for sure to save time, but I agree with you. It'd be great if they iterated over my column names and my column formulas and just inserted them in order. I don't even care if they're all the same size. I can go fight with that, but if all my data is already set out in front of me, that'd make life so much nicer.
So we've got some good stuff for Acumatica here. Any other really things that jump out at you is this is what reports are really designed to do, that over generic inquiries?
Yeah, so one other thing, we were talking about changing the text color is great, but changing the entire report structure and color is something that you do only have available to you in the report writer. You want to throw a logo at the top to make a beautiful document, you're going to need the report writer. And while I do generally work with operations, I have to work with my design team as well. And you better believe they want everything to have this beautiful blue border. They want to have a bigger header. They want this specific font to be used and sent out. And I have to be able to bend to their requests as well. So the report writer gives me the flexibility to be like, hey man, if you just want a big orange bar on the side, I could put a big orange bar on the side. Why not, right? And so out-of-house documents, frequently we have to follow very specific formats and groupings. I've had people complain about the way their invoices look off the stock invoice we have, so I'll make them a custom invoice where their numbers could be moved a little bit. Maybe they wanted to see something in cubic meters instead of cubic feet, that kind of stuff. It's really nice to be able to give the form that you want, not just the function, because you have different use cases for the form depending on the departments you're working in.
Nice. Now, I hear you doing a lot of reports.
Yeah.
And you brought up the list before. And something I want to touch on is being not the greatest for reports. There's not a good way to get rid of these.
No. The only way I found is literally to go into the customization screen where you can write SQL code. And I'm not about to write SQL code to try to drop one row out of a table that holds my reports in the hopes that I'm not going to fry my entire database. So my report list, as you can see, it is flooded. And I have never removed a single report from the day I started, which means my mistakes are in here. That's kind of handy to be able to go back, but it's also kind of like, can we just get rid of that? Can I have that name back, that namespace? I don't need this big old list.
What's interesting is I'm pretty sure years ago, you used to be able to go into the report and delete the version. And as long as you deleted all the versions, it was gone. But I think they prevented that, which I kind of like, so you don't accidentally kill the report. But it would be nice to have the ability somewhere to do that through the interface.
Tim, have you ever played around with sitemap or anything, or is this tied to sitemap, that list, or is that just a kind of a SQL list that's somewhere?
Yeah, I don't think it is. It's stored in the user table, if I recall correctly. And so you put the report out there first, and then if you want it available in Acumatica, you put it on the sitemap. But you don't even have to put it on the sitemap like in a subreport situation. You could call a report that's not even on the sitemap.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually how I do all my sub-reports. None of them are on the sitemap. Nobody wants to run a report that just generates like an item ID and its components without any other information. It doesn't even have headers, right? Because I'm just using it to bring into another data set. And so, yeah, you don't have to put them on the sitemap unless you want them to be visible to your users. But I've not found a good way to remove them off that list, and it's been very frustrating. And I talked to my VARs at Ben Porter, and they pretty much told me the same thing of, yeah, that's just a shortcoming. And I'm like, well, things to improve upon for later.
You know, on that same vein, I don't know if you've ever tried this, but it is sometimes useful to run a sub-report outside of the main report. And to put it on the sitemap just for that purpose is kind of annoying. But there is a way to do that in the URL. I don't know if you've ever tried that. Call a report that's not on the sitemap.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, like I was saying, that's how I do my sub-reports, is I've called them specifically through the URL method.
Gotcha. Do you want to show that? That quick report launcher trick?
I can't remember where I hid this thing.
You might not be able to do that in your environment. That's okay. Never mind.
Yeah, I don't remember if this one still got it. Oh, no, this one now is actually, we stored that attribute. We no longer have to find the finished good ID for components. We had a hard time with a component knowing what finished goods it went to, but we've started storing that as a variable now. It's in our attributes table. This used to be a sub-report on the end of here that would call out what those components could possibly go to. Because we build items at my company. So one component could go to many finished goods, and I needed to store that. It got to where the users also wanted this information at their fingertips, so we just started storing it at the item level in the attributes.
Now, and Tim, you may have explored some of this. Michael and I were talking yesterday. In the financial reports, they give you that ability to do drill downs, do hyperlinks to drill down into the data. Do normal reports have that ability? Can you hyperlink reports to anywhere in Acumatica if someone wanted to do drill downs?
That one's for me or Michael?
Either of you guys, actually. I know Michael and I were chatting. He had not explored that at all.
Yeah, you can do it. You got to actually, if you want to click on one of those fields, you'll see it.
Give me a quick second. Let me follow along here. Grab this.
So you do have in the navigate method, and I don't recall off the top of my head, but it's in actually the S130 course. Yeah, if you click that drop down, I can't recall which is which. One of them will allow you to build a full URL. And sometimes you have to do that, like if you want to really fine tune it. But if you think about calling up a record in Acumatica as just a URL, and because you can then, I forget which one it is, client or server, but then if you go down to navigate URL in that same section and you click in there, you'll get the 3 dots. So you can write a formula that builds the URL for you. That's one way to do it. There's also an easier way to do it. I think it might be the navigate method server that allows you to just put the field you're looking for, and sometimes it's smart enough to build the URL for you. But for sure, you can do it manually.
Yeah, give me a quick second. I've got this built. I just need to find which one of these I've shoved it into. Because I believe my purchase orders are all linked back. Where is it?
And some of the fields just have it out of the box, if I remember correctly.
Right, here's one, navigate URL.
There you go.
So you'll notice when you open up your Acumatica instance, and let's say you go to stock items, that this part of the URL is always the same. And at the very end, it's just your inventory CD. So in this case, just put plus inventory CD at the end of that. You do have to surround your URL in single quotes. It is treated as a text string. So it's equals to open quote, your URL, close quote, plus whatever you're using as your identifier. This could be a purchase order number. This could be an inventory CD. This could be sales order, invoices, anything like that. All the URLs, thankfully, and Acumatica are linked in what I would consider to be a very logical fashion, to where you're not going to be lost in the sauce with some random set of letters that doesn't make sense.
Nice. So that will open up the data, which is nice. I will say though that one of the bonuses for generic inquiries is that ability to do side panels. So as we're kind of ticking who wins, generic inquiries do have that better drill down capability. So we will give that. So if you know people are going to need to drill down, it's something to kind of consider if it makes sense for a report versus generic inquiry.
Right. And so in this case, one of the things that I like about this versus an inquiry, when you click on the side panel, that's great. But when you click to drill into an item in a generic inquiry, it takes you away from the inquiry into that item. And with this, you set your target to __ blank. This is going to open up a new tab in my browser. So I can quickly open up like 5 different containers without leaving the report or 5 different items. And it will just open up 5 new tabs of items for me in my browser, which is awesome that I can quickly then go reference those items that I think may have issues.
Very nice.
Can you click back into that navigate URL? I noticed one thing might be worth pointing out. I like how you put the company ID in there, because if you have multiple tenants, that company ID is specifying the tenant. You just want to be careful there. If you're in the test tenant and you drill down on something, you just drill down into the live tenant and might not realize it. So just something to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't be afraid to segment your code either, people. Like, that's a poorly written piece of code. This is much better. This is equal to a URL plus an inventory CD. And this validates just the same as the previous line. This is the exact same output. They don't care about white space. That validates just fine. So indent your code if you've got something big, or if it confuses you, or if you know you're going to be coming back to play with it again. Make it look pretty, or you're going to have regrets down the road.
I like that. I think you can even put comments in there.
Oh, absolutely.
If it was really some big gigantic formula.
Yeah, I do that all the time where I'm like, hey, like this adds SOs together. And then you just do your little / to get back out of it. Again, it will validate just fine. And now you've got a note next to it. This can also be done inline, so you can put that right next to here. It'll still validate as long as you've got an open and closing /*, which is just pretty basic syntax. So that's not too terrible to run with. And I do that all the time when I'm confused, or when I'm taking notes, like I've got this part of my formula to process. I don't know why this second half is broken, but every time I add it in, it's causing an error. This way, when I'm building my reports, because they break before they work, right? I mean, every time you write it in the report writer, you're pretty much going to have it break first time. You can leave notes to say, hey, man, I know that this breaks. I'm just not sure where.
Very nice. Yeah, we do a lot of that on multiple lines because it does save it too. So it doesn't collapse that white space after you save the report. Next time you go into it, it looks just like that.
Yeah, and that's the same in the variable editor. So if you're going to go make crazy code and use variables, you can indent that code and make your life so much easier when you come back to that adventure.
Nice. All right. Anything else you guys want to discuss today? I know, Tim, you had mentioned a past webinar on different tips and tricks that are out there. So if you can.
Yeah, I'll drop the chat right now, just for some people might have seen this. This is like a 2-hour webinar that Maya from Acumatica did. Some more report designer examples, and I'll drop that right now into the chat.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, I looked at that video as well. I love the way that that's presented. It's slow and methodical. It doesn't feel like it's rushed at all, and I really enjoyed looking at quite a few of the examples that were in there. A little long, but it's definitely worth your time if you've got it.
Very nice.
Yeah, I mean, I guess all these things are great about the report designer, but there are drawbacks. Let's be honest. This is not fast. This is slow. This is real slow. If I tell somebody I can make something in the generic inquiry in about 10 minutes, it might take me 20 to 30 in the report writer. It's just the nature of the beast that it's going to take you longer. So I don't come here as my first go-to. I feel like I have to be forced to want to come here, right? Otherwise, I'm wasting my time and my company's time, and that's not the way to do business. The one other big thing that I would complain about in this is that you don't always know. Let me come into the build schema, which codes you're looking for in a filter. Do we have one? Here we are. PO line type not equal to DN. Who knows what DN stands for? Like no one. And even when you want it, you're not quite sure what the code is. So I find that in generic inquiries, if you use export to XML, I should actually have one on my list here. I use Notepad++ because that's the kind of champ I am. Let's go to open orders here. Grab that. Here we are. When we scroll down here, they're going to keep all your filters in this result here. And so I can quickly tell exactly what filters they're looking for. So like the field location ID is visible, that kind of fun stuff. And this will tell you like my in-location.location status, the condition is it equals, and then the value is way A1. And if you use the, you can use from schema in a generic inquiry, right? So instead of giving you weird codes, it'll actually say it's an order of status open. But when you come in here, it'll tell you the value equals O for an open order. And so now you know in the report writer, you need to use the letter O. And I've done this so many times because the report writer doesn't give me the ability to pick from the schema to say, hey, the sales order type is SO, or the sales order type is TR for transfers. To know that, I go into the inquiry, I say sales order type equals from schema, and then I'll pick open, export to XML, open it up in your favorite text editor, and you're going to see the value is O for open, or SO for sales order, or TR for transfers. And that is a huge drawback in the report writer that I have to use an inquiry to find out what magic codes I'm trying to tie out to everywhere. Like the user ship status can't equal CM. Like I didn't know what that was. I had to go in and actually set the ship status to what I wanted, which is component, and then export it to XML and it says, hey, it's equal to CM. And I was like, all right, now I know the answer.
Nice. And do you want to show them where that I don't know if you can show your, or why don't you tell us where you find that export to XML?
Yeah, so let me jump in here real fast. Should be able to get into this.
Michael,
I love this because I have a bunch of these stems.
I took your screen off just in case you pull up something sensitive. Let me know when you want it back.
Oh, go ahead and put it back on. I'm pretty good at navigating away from anything that's going to get me into trouble. So in here, we've got this temporary thing. Let's go ahead and just remove this table. I want to do sales orders. Sorry, that's so order, right? So hooray, it's a sales order. I'm happy with that. I don't need any relationships, don't have any parameters, don't have any conditions. My results grid, I'm just going to go ahead and remove these because these are my temporary files that don't do anything. So here's where it matters. In my conditions, I'm like, I have a sales order and it has a status. And the status equals, click from schema, say it's pending approval. I don't know what code that is, but I want to show all my users everything that's pending approval. So I'm going to hit save. I'm going to hit export to as XML. Little magic file pops up. Scroll down to the bottom. All that garbage at the top you can ignore. It's always down here at the bottom. And let's see what we've got here. Equals value is P for that, for pending orders. So in the report writer, I need to write that the SO order status equals P. And you don't know that in the report writer unless you either have innate knowledge or you've exported it from your generic inquiry like I've done here. And so that's really fantastic that now I know the sales order status equals P. And that's like, oh, awesome. I can go set that in my report writer now.
Yeah, so powerful that little tidbit was not one of the other areas that we talked about. That was Florida. I'm like, oh yeah, we go into to SQL a lot, and this saves that. There's no need to even go into for us SQL editor to see anything. We have your abilities to do that. So all those people who are on the hosted version, 99% of our audience, they have ways to find this data.
Yeah, there's a ton of these that are useful for exporting to XML. And honestly, if you're ever really trying to figure out what's going on behind the scenes, export to XML, you're going to get the full output from that whole thing. Every single group I put in, all that fun stuff.
And can I show an alternate real quick?
Yeah,
absolutely.
So this
Michael's our guest. We can't diss his stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I think you still need what you did there, Mike. This is an alternate, and I don't recall what version this came in. I think it's fairly recent. You'll see I'm in 2020 on R1, the latest. But if you do inspect element here on the status field, they do now have this drop-down values box where you get to see the codes for each one of the statuses. So like on your sales order status, you'll be able to do this in whatever version this came in. But your first field that you did was line type, and I don't see that yet on down here on line type. I don't have that button. So it'd be nice if Acumatica expands that out. But you know, for some fields, you still need that XML trick that you just showed.
Oh, that's real slick. I'm looking forward to that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm in 2020 R1 right now, and I don't see that feature. So it must have been in the last couple releases. But very cool. I see my video is frozen, so some application stole my video again. I'm glad I'm not doing anything too bad. I'm glad Michael wasn't speaking. I was like picking my nose or something.
I'm just glad it wasn't me. Quite honestly, I'm like, hey, you know what? If I'm not the guy with tech problems today, I'm winning.
It's okay. It's my good side.
He speaks directly into your mind. He doesn't have to use his mouth. He's fantastic like that. No, yeah. So you were saying, just real quick, I want to follow along. It was customization inspect element is what you were using?
It's just a regular inspect element. You don't even have to go further. The first thing that pops up is when you see the.
I need to upgrade my system then.
Yeah, I don't know what version it came in. So it sounds like, Ryan, you're on 2020 R1. It must be 2020 R2, maybe. So it's a fairly recent change, and it'd be nice if they had it on more fields like that line type.
And your hotkey for inspect element, by the way, is Control Alt, and then you can just click on a field without having to go to that customization menu.
Right, because I've used the inspect element all the time because I need to know the name, because a lot of times the display name is not the proper name. And yeah, you're going to need to hit that Control Alt and click to go, right, see what you're up to. But I just don't have the magic button in the top right to show me all the fun drop-down options for these.
Oh, wait, this is go ahead, Tim.
I like that XML thing for other reasons as well. Like I've also run into, like I'm getting an error on the field that's not even displayed on the canvas. Like I added it way over to the side and then I resized the canvas down so I don't even see it there. But the error is giving me the field name, and the XML is showing you everything in that report. So it's being able to search for a field name or whatever error message you're getting. Sometimes that helps you find it even though you can't even see it on the canvas, or it might be buried in a variable somewhere, but you're not sure which one. It's a lot easier to search that. You were showing the XML file for a generic inquiry, but of course you could also do the same thing with the report. Just save it as an RPX file, search that with Notepad, and you've got the same benefit there because it's all stored in that XML format.
Yeah, I've absolutely had to do that before. I just recently broke all my import scenarios, and we had to export a bunch of stuff to XML to figure out what I broke. By the way, if you're using an import scenario, never, ever, ever name your column ignore. That is a reserved keyword, and it breaks the database.
Interesting.
It'll tell you that an item with the same key already exists, and it won't even open your import scenario. It's fantastic. And then you get to send that to Acumatica, and they just growl at you. I've been rebuilding my import scenarios this week.
I will say I love import scenarios because they're like the poor man's API. So you can do a lot of things through import scenarios without having to actually go through anything like an API or any code like that.
Yeah, some of mine are just really shot right now, and that's all I get because they're broken. Is an item with the same key has already been added.
All right, guys. Well, Michael, Tim, I know you jumped in here. I do want to throw out one last thing. Tim, thank you for Tim. Great team, UCLA. Way to represent.
That's right. Final Four right here.
Man, Cinderella. So I don't know if anyone on the YouTube can chime in. We're discussing before the show why UCLA had to play to get into the tournament, but yet they were seeded 11th. It's just
instead of 16th, right? Yeah.
Yeah. We were so confused. I mean, if you played to get in, you'd obviously be 16th. Why wasn't the 16th person have to play to get in? So who knows? There's some kind of craziness. But Tim can be happy that they made the Final Four, so he can keep the shirt. He did have the tag on it before he came on today, so he wasn't sure if they're gonna make Final Four and he's gonna return it.
That's true. I bought it the day of their Elite Eight game, and the person behind me in line had two daughters. One was in line with him going to UCLA, and the other daughter goes to Michigan. So that worked out really well for them.
Well, guys, thank you everybody who for watching today. Thank you, Michael, very much for all the amazing tips and tricks. You made me a believer in reports. Very excited. I got to get our developer on the board. I got to give him this recording and have him watch the variables, because that in itself is is worth the price of admission.
Yeah, the
If we were
runtime
charging
performance is great.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, thank you very much, Michael. Thank you, Silkcraft, for allowing Michael to be here. Thank you, Tim, for joining us as well. And thank you, audience, for helping make all this happen. And guys, stay tuned. We've had the generic inquiries, geek out session on generic inquiries. We've had the rebuttal from reports, but in 2 weeks we have the Excel version of things. So okay, hey, you know what? There's a place for reports. There's a place for generic inquiries, but there are limitations, and we get to find out really what Excel can do and the power that Excel brings, and some of the reporting that you can do within Excel that you really can't do in any other aspect of the reporting side of things. So we have Gabriel from Velixo, who will be with us in 2 weeks. So very exciting live event coming up. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys very much for attending, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Bye, guys.
Take care, everyone.